Kendra is my name, and the man I once referred to as my mentor fired me from the very firm I helped develop right in front of the whole engineering floor. At 7:43 a.m., the email arrived. Restructure notice is the subject line. I had just entered the office and noticed it, when the kitchenette was still smelling like burnt coffee. My laptop was still starting up, when I stood there stunned. Our COO and one of the initial co-founders, Eric, came out of the glass conference room 2 minutes later and waved me in. When I walked in, he didn't glance at me. Rather, he said in an overly informal tone, "This is best for everyone," and passed a big package over the table. I blinked. "What is it?" He gestured to the documents. "Your package for transformation. Legal has already given its approval. You have 30 minutes to gather your belongings." I didn't take a seat. "You're not serious." The only indication that he was anxious was the slight clenching of his jaw. "Last night, the board cast its vote. You no longer share the company's long-term goals." Our HR lead, Rachel, was standing clumsily in the corner with a business laptop tucked under her arm when I noticed her. She appeared to not want to be there as seen by her pale face. Is this as a result of my pointing out the inconsistencies in the updated IP filings? With my heart pounding, I asked. Eric didn't recoil. "No, this has to do with concentration. We need leaders that support the direction we are taking as we pivot." He signaled the end of the meeting by standing. I didn't read the envelope before picking it up. I walked right by the HR assistant, who attempted to act as though this was a routine situation, past the engineers who were unaware of the recent events. I had just yesterday loaded the whiteboard with schematics. The corridor appeared longer than I had recalled. Or perhaps my breathing wasn't correct. Half an hour. That was all that was required to wipe out 4 years. 4 years of 16-hour workdays sleeping beneath my desk on the week of launch and a fierce battle to get our prototype approved by the FDA. Prior to the seed round, I was present. I was the one who built the damn core algorithm prior to the Series A. And now, the man who used to refer to me as his secret weapon was sending me off with a cardboard box and a best of luck. I refrained from crying, then no. But as soon as the elevator doors closed, something inside of me exploded. Not because of heartache, out of clarity. They weren't simply ignoring me, they had something to hide. And I already knew in my heart what it was. They were unaware that I had a backup. The source code is in one copy. Concealed, encrypted, tagged with a piece that only I knew. Eric believed he had put the past behind him. However, I created the fucking system, and I was going to dig it up again. It's strange because I didn't anticipate it, or perhaps I did. Perhaps the signs were there all along, just too silent for me to see. About 7 months prior to the firing, it began. We had just closed our Series B. The break room was filled with half-drunk champagne bottles, the crew was buzzing, and Eric gave one of those speeches when every word seemed like it was PR worked. He used words like vision realignment, leveraging synergies, and data equity, which sound clever but have no real meaning. As usual, I stayed up late after the party that night. A lukewarm cup of ginger tea, the buzzing servers, and me. I don't recall seeing anything strange when I opened the most recent build logs. A timestamp on a file that I hadn't touched, neither mine nor QA's. Aegis Core V2 Internal was the name given to it. It was a variation of my first method. However, without a commit log version, control ticket, or anything else. In Slack, I reported it. Nobody answered. The file vanished the following morning. Rachel from compliance shrugged when I inquired, adding that occasionally DevOps performed maintenance overnight. Her eyes, however, averted too quickly. I gave it up. I told myself that I was worn out, suspicious. I had been overworking myself. Then the investor deck's missing credits appeared. When I pointed out that my name wasn't under core engineering, Eric grinned as if I were being petty. He declared, "You are too valuable to be confined. Every aspect of the business is impacted by your efforts. It is inferred, implied." As if it were a compliment, he said it. As if I should be grateful for his invisibility. The project also began to change. The meetings that I used to chair were rescheduled for when I wasn't available. Important conversations took place on Slack channels that were abruptly made private. When I mentioned the system design I created from scratch, junior engineers started to appear perplexed, as if someone had given them a different narrative. After graduating from MIT, one of them, Ravi, once questioned me, "Didn't Eric write the initial diagnostic flow?" I chuckled. Then I understood that he meant business. "No," I informed him. "I was that person within my apartment, in the middle of a thunderstorm, sleeping for 2 hours and using a borrowed laptop." Like I had told him Santa wasn't real, he blinked. The realization that I was being erased began to set in at that point. Not dismissed, not demoted, simply deleted. Like a pencil sketch being gradually erased, till the paper itself forgot I had ever been there. I wish I could claim that I went straight up to Eric. However, I didn't. I had self-doubt. I've been in the tech industry long enough to understand how simple it is to doubt what you know to be true, particularly when the smiling faces also sign your paycheck. I remained, I put in more effort, and I simply posted a remark, tagged it, and hoped that someone else would take notice of the second anomaly in the code, which was a new function performing diagnostics in the background without any documentation. Nobody did. I began to notice things outside of work instead. Eric filed a provisional patent for our detection algorithm, but it didn't include my name. It was a clerical error, he explained. I began to be excluded from all hands planning, even meals for the team. Then 2 weeks prior to the axe falling, I heard my name as I passed the executive wing. "She's very intelligent," someone said. "But it's too sentimental, not scalable." I wasn't broken by the insult. It was the informality, as if it were a fact, as if I were simply noise. I discovered the original code I had hidden 2 years prior before the pivot before the board, and before Eric decided my name was no longer convenient when I went home that evening and opened my hard drive archive. I examined the KE Medcore March file name, and I had a gut feeling that the time had come, because there was a problem within the organization. Something greater than politics and ego. Additionally, someone likely Eric was making sure that I couldn't be linked to it. However, they overlooked one point. I never remove anything. I drove out to my uncle's cabin in the high desert 3 days after I was dismissed. Just wind through junipers and the occasional hawk slicing across the sky, no Wi-Fi, no cell reception. It wasn't a retreat. Clarity was the key. I took a damaged moleskin that I hadn't touched in years, along with my laptop and 2 flash drives. I needed the quiet that reverberates when you finally stop acting like nothing is wrong. The first day I did nothing except walk, allowing my mind to wander, unravel, and then resurface. By dusk I opened the backup disk while sitting on the veranda with a shawl around my shoulders. There were system notes, architecture maps, and old commits from the frantic early months of prototyping, when the technology was still only a concept, and I thought it would revolutionize people's lives. Buried under one of the "Do Not Use Temp" subfolders was an early draft of the diagnostic flow that still had my remarks on it. The exact lines that I noticed were changed and repeated in that enigmatic Aegis core build months ago. It was only now that my failsafes were removed from the updated version. Without the patient's complete consent, the code might execute. It might gather biometric input without alerting the user. I took a deep seat. It wasn't an error. That was deliberate. The ramifications strike like lightning. Eric has been doing more than merely changing the past. He was altering the technology to get around ethical safeguards, probably in order to avoid compliance audits or expedite FDA authorization. That was more than just dubious. It was illegal, and they intended to blame me. Consider this: I was officially listed as the principal architect. The paper trail would lead to my name if something broke, a patient was injured, or a senator chose to look into it. Not Eric's, not the recently hired CTO. Me. The panic changed to steel at that point. I took out my old journal. Each page has a breadcrumb of ink-based sketches, decision trees, and rough manuscripts with dates concrete time-stamped. I turned to the back of the book, where I had written my motto years before: "Grow roots if they try to bury you." I gave a sour smile. They attempted my burial. However, they neglected that the roots were still alive. I made my way back into the city in silence. Rented a camera-free studio on a month-to-month basis. Burner emails were used. At a diner off the highway, I ran into Cass, an old coworker. 6 months before me, she had quit the company claiming vibes. It turned out that vibes was a code word for internal pressure to fabricate QA reports. Although she lacked evidence, she recalled strange updates and private encounters. I presented my discovery to her. She spent a long time looking at the screen. "This is enormous," she muttered. "I understand." Then she did something that caught me off guard. Taking a USB out of her tote bag, she did so. She remarked, "I never thought I'd need this." However, I backed up every testing log I had worked on after they let me leave, just in case. For the following 5 hours, we compared her statistics with mine. The dates coincided. Her reports were consistent with the faults, including the circumvented permissions and hidden overrides. Eric wasn't the only one. The board was the culprit, the recently appointed CTO. Finance certainly knew, even if legal didn't. They were not merely pilfering my work. They were offering a defective product for sale, risky, and selling it under my name. Everything was printed by me. Use tabs with labels to bind it. A fresh folder. Using a black Sharpie, one word is printed over the front. The truth. I wasn't finished, though. I had one more move. An additional key that has been unutilized for many years. You see, at the beginning, when Eric still referred to me as his partner in code, we shared a Git repository, only the two of us. Our machines are in a straight line. Later, he closed it down and transferred everything to corporate. However, prior to the switchover, I had a mirror of the previous version preserved. I launched it and started looking through device logs, IP addresses, and commit comments. Then I discovered it, a push from Antered piece of equipment 2 months ago. It introduced the modified code fork that Cass had detected into the test server. The email address admin.ye.arbor.dev was used, the handle of Eric's former personal sandbox. He utilized the identical one back when we were still developing prototypes. The metadata had not even been scrubbed by him. I burst out laughing. Not happiness, but incredulity. The conceit. The indolence. They genuinely believed that nobody would ever notice. I moved everything to a geo-redundant, off-grid, double-encrypted cloud vault that evening. Then I contacted Margot Hines, whom I hadn't spoken to in a long time. She worked as a tech journalist doing investigative work. Back when I still thought panel discussions and good coffee were important, we met at a conference. "If the story is too clean, someone edited the truth," she once told me. I only sent her one message. "You want a real story? I've got something that could bring down an entire startup. Paper trails, code history, ethics violations, and forgery. Let me know." After 6 minutes, she responded, "When and where?" The diner was my choice. Same booth in the corner. Cass accompanied me. The folder did the same. Margot read without blinking. Lips squeezed tight, she simply continued to flip. Her voice was piercing as she looked up. She stated, "This isn't just fraud. This is a setup." "I understand." Her voice was low as she leaned forward. "They're going to pursue you." I gave a nod. "Give them permission, because I knew the truth now." Furthermore, they were unaware that I was going to destroy their entire narrative in court and code and in the eyes of all investors who believed they were supporting innovation. On a Monday, the article was published at 7:01 a.m. The algorithm that lied inside Arbor Diagnostics cover-up, Margot Hines' special investigation. The Verge is the byline. The post received 200,000 views in 2 hours. Arbor's name was trending by lunchtime and not in a positive way. Already, tech Twitter was honing its skills. LinkedIn was ablaze with ambiguous leadership reflections from former workers. None of them anticipated what would happen next, but one Forbes contributor referred to it as the Theranos for diagnostics, only dumber, because it wasn't the match, even if the article was on fire. That occurred when Margot released the code at 2:37 p.m. Not all of it, only a little bit. However, it is sufficient to demonstrate the bypass commands, enough to demonstrate intent. She included screenshots of both the doctored and my original versions in a follow-up thread. The altered lines of logic that permitted data extraction prior to user authorization were indicated in red. At that point, the public's curiosity turned to rage. However, I wasn't observing the fallout. 3 blocks from Arbor's glass tower, I was sipping lukewarm coffee in a lawyer's office, As Sky Patel, a tech ethics lawyer Cass had put me in touch with, went over the next steps. Are you prepared? She put a large folder between us and asked. Because there is no turning back. Once we file the cease and desist order and this whistleblower claim. I gazed at the folder below. My file. The truth document has been updated with new information, including timestamps, investigative results, and even a written declaration from Cass. I said, let them come. Sky grinned. That's the essence. That afternoon, we submitted the paperwork. Copies were forwarded to the Office of Tech Oversight, the SEC, and the board. We waited after that. Arbor convened an emergency meeting behind closed doors that evening. Margot received a transcript from someone. We need to get ahead of this, Eric said at the beginning. And she's unstable? We have documentation in the end. However, I wasn't. I was in possession of receipts. We delivered them the following day. You see, my legal filing made progress while Margot's story created a stir. An affidavit from a digital forensics specialist, Luis, who had reverse-engineered spyware for the FBI, was attached to the cease and desist. After examining the IP logs from Eric's personal push, he was able to link them to a San Mateo private VPN server that was leased by Eric's own LLC. Better still, we had sound. Do you recall the offhand comment that I overheard months ago, in which someone claimed that I was too emotional to scale? It wasn't casual. It was captured on a microphone in a meeting room that connected to the business's auto-transcription program. After reading the story, a junior PM I mentored forwarded the file to me. They spoke as if you were already gone. He added, however you constructed everything. The actual twist, however the one I hadn't anticipated, came from a surprising place. Rachel, HR, Rachel. 3 days after the piece was published, she gave me a call. She spoke haltingly. She inquired as to whether I had a secure email, claimed to have something I should see. A scanned copy of a document dated 6 weeks prior to my termination was included. Subject, Kendra Shaw's transition strategy. The label read, confidential, Eric's signature. 2 board members were CC'd. The first sentence was as follows. With effect from Q3, we will gradually remove Kendra Shaw's access to architecture-level talks and transition her into a more passive role. Until a complete substitute is found, her name will continue to appear on provisional patents. I hadn't just been let go. My erasure had been planned out by them, printed. Why do you assist me? I questioned her. Rachel let out a deep breath. Because I insisted it was only business. However, it ceased to feel like business when you saw them ruin what you had worked so hard to create. That week, we submitted an amended lawsuit. Deception reprisal and theft of intellectual property. Protections for whistleblowers. Within hours, Margot published her 3rd piece, She Didn't Just Build It, They Planned to Steal It All. But Eric was already falling apart by that point. Emails were leaked. One of the board members resigned. Investors started to withdraw. Fast-moving rumors circulated about an emergency sale. In the midst of everything, I received a call from someone I didn't anticipate, Elaine Voss, our Series A lead investor. She was a sharp-eyed, reserved woman who rarely spoke but never forgot a number. She declared, I read everything. I witnessed their actions. I remained silent. She said, tell me what you want. I suddenly came to the realization that I didn't seek retribution. I had other desires. I wanted the story to be properly set. I wanted the work to endure, to be rebuilt rather than buried beneath NDAs and damaged reputations. I desired to regain my name, my voice, my location. I said, I want a fresh start. The IP received a credit. I got my name back. The fraudulent filings were removed, and it's not for them that I seek funding, for me. For a moment, Elaine was silent. Are you going to rebuild? I gave a nod. Well, she said, because I initially invested, because of folks like you, not Eric, not the board. 24 hours later, she sent the seed money. Eric was on medical leave by Friday. 2 government investigations were underway against Arbor Diagnostics by Monday. And me, I had more calm in my chest than I had in years, as I sat at a little desk in a downtown co-working space, looking at a blank whiteboard and holding a pen. However, it wasn't finished yet, not until I confronted them, in person, and informed them of everything they attempted to pilfer. Was returning, according to my terms. It wasn't exactly an office when I first arrived at my new workplace. It was a single room above a bookshop with dusty windows, hardwood floors, and a robin's egg blue wall. It was a used desk. Like it had weathered 2 wars, the coffee maker sputtered. However, my name was on the door, Shaw Kendra founder. Now the silence was different. Not alone. Just be honest. The business. Every signal follows a field line if you're quiet enough to trace it, my grandfather used to remark when I was a child repairing the old radio in his garage. That's why it's called field line systems. This was what it was. Following the facts. Through everything they attempted to conceal, including betrayal and loudness, we had no intention of burning bright or scaling quickly. We were building slowly, moral transparent. Cass became my lead engineer. After testifying at the ethics tribunal that contributed to the deconstruction of Arbor's leadership, Rachel also joined us. And the mic file that I received from the junior PM, I seated him at the table. No one had ever done that before, he remarked. Get used to it. I urged. However, retaliation or media attention did not bring about the mending. It was later, silently. Similar to grass regrowing after a fire. On that day, I received notification that my name had been reinstated as the original creator and the patents had been re-registered. The patent office's official note came in a thin envelope. It wasn't framed by me. I simply slipped it into the notebook containing my old drawings. Between the doing and the imagining, that's where it belonged. The barista looked up and remarked, "You're that engineer, right?" The afternoon I entered the same cafe where Eric used to have strategy chats. Who was the whistleblower that was courageous? He grinned. It wasn't because I felt heroic. There were still days when I woke up sweating and dreamed about boardrooms and signatures I had never written. But it reminded me why I started to hear that from a stranger who wasn't quoting market caps or stats, simply brave. Because I wasn't trying to prove myself correct. I had to prove that I belonged. I ran into Eric again a few months later at a compliance seminar. The temples are now gray, thinner. As I passed by, he gave me an excessive amount of attention. Didn't speak, and I continued. For what reason would I say he was aware already? Those that want to destroy you never anticipate that you will live much less, come back stronger, more shrewd, and more complete than before. They never think the emotional ones will outlive them, all the silent ones will speak, or the unseen ones will stand. However, I did. And I will. I now write 3 items in my notepad each day. I developed this practice during my first week at the new office. It matters what we built. I am not defined by what they did. If you live it out loud, nobody can take what's in your name. And I've left the same line I penned years ago on the back cover beneath all the ink smudges and scratches. Grow roots if they try to bury you. I didn't only grow roots, it turns out. I created a forest. I'm still developing too.